Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to the very first episode of TellyCast, the TV industry news review. Every week on TellyCast, I'll be speaking to the movers and shakers in the international TV industry. Producers, commissioners, distributors and industry bodies, the names behind some of the biggest hits in TV. And I'll be chatting to the industry's most influential journalists to get to the heart of the biggest stories affecting the global TV industry. TellyCast is about the global business of TV, so we'll be having guests on the show from all around the world to hear their viewpoints on what's happening in their own markets. Now, it obviously hasn't escaped us that we're launching this new podcast in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. COVID-19 means massive change right across the media landscape, with uncertain futures for broadcasters, streamers, producers, markets, distributors, and the rest of the TV ecosystem. So we'll focus on a range of subjects affecting those who work in the industry and try and offer some thoughts on what the new normal will look like, how to adapt, and who the winners and losers might be. So thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoy the show. And if you do, please subscribe, share it with friends and colleagues, give us a review on your podcast service, and follow us on Twitter @TellyCastTV. And let us know what you think of the show. So, let's get on with it. Coming up on this very first episode of TellyCast, Edinburgh TV Festival's creative director Stuart Clark and Broadcast Magazine's editor-in-chief Chris Curtis give their thoughts on the week's TV industry news. And we'll be finding out who their heroes of the week are and who they'll be telling to get in the bin. Deadline Hollywood's Pete White joins us this week and every week from the City of Angels to give us the LA lowdown on this week's biggest TV industry news. And our research partner, K7 Media's Gert Leasis, gives us the analyst's view on a different trend he's seeing in the global industry every week. It's all coming up on TellyCast. So my first guests on the show are two prominent leaders in the TV media community. A very warm welcome to Edinburgh TV Festival's creative director Stuart Clark and Broadcast Magazine's editor-in-chief Chris Curtis. Welcome, guys.
Hi Justin, thanks for having me on the show. Glad to be here.
Hello Justin, nice to speak to you.
So thanks to you both for taking the time to come on the show. Let's start with you, Stuart. So you're 4 months into your new role at Edinburgh TV Festival. You must have had a crazy start to the year.
Yeah, it's been interesting, Justin. Of course, it wasn't kind of. I don't think anyone's last 4 months have panned out quite how they expected. And that's the same for me in a work sense, in that we're not running a physical festival, and we'll get into this a bit more later, I think. But what we are doing is moving to digital and doing a whole lot of stuff between now and then. But what I have seen is kind of the industry's really behind us, which is really great. And obviously we kind of have a UK focus, but the international piece is building as well. But yeah, it's kind of I'd say an interesting time. It's an incredibly challenging time for everyone. We just have to be upfront about that.
Absolutely. I think it's testament to you that the event is still taking place in a modified form. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're approaching it this year?
Yeah, so I think as we've seen with lots of events, sort of physical events and festivals and markets, they're just not able to go ahead. And we made a call. We could have waited a bit longer. I think there are different ways of approaching it. You can kind of wait till the last minute to see how your allotted date looks, or you can kind of make that decision earlier, which allows you to kind of plan and rethink stuff and rework stuff. So we did that, but what we are doing is we're still doing a 3-day event in August. We're kind of committed to that structure, the McTaggart, the alternative McTaggart, the kind of masterclasses, the controller sessions, all the stuff that people come to Edinburgh for. Will still be there. The networking piece, is harder to replicate online, but there's stuff you can do as well. So what we're doing now is really sort of drilling down into kind of what a festival can look like when you move it to digital, so that it becomes more than just a kind of a load of videos put up on a digital video platform. Because I think that's the risk if you don't get it right, is how you try and capture some of that kind of feel of something. And Edinburgh, it's a festival, right? So it's more than just kind of conference sessions. It's supposed to be fun and interactive, as well as a place where you learn stuff and get into the kind of nuts and bolts of what's affecting the industry. And let's be honest, in terms of what's affecting the industry, there's probably never been a greater need for people to really talk about what happens next, what just happened, what happens next, where am I going to be working a year, what's work going to look like, etc., etc. It just carries on and on in terms of the questions. So we're going to be there to get amazing people to talk about those things and allow people to get involved.
Can you tell us a little bit about who we can expect to see at Edinburgh this year?
In August, for the McTaggart and those sessions, you're going to have to wait and see, I'm afraid, as we wait to make announcements. But what I can say today is that we will be running controller sessions, and they're going to be starting from next week. I mean, people who go to Edinburgh will know that format, and we were always going to do them in digital form. But in speaking to our advisory committee and others, and that committee is kind of broadcasters, commissioners, indie bosses, producers of all different sizes, what we heard over and over again was that there's just a real need to hear from those sort of industry leaders, those channel bosses at the moment, and not to wait till August. So what we want to do is something which is about the here and now, how people are navigating their way through what's happening at this exact moment. And in August, maybe it's a time to kind of take stock a little bit, one would hope. I think it's a very, very good lineup. So as of next week, we have Charlotte Moore from the BBC, we have Kevin Lygo from ITV, we have Ben Frau from Channel 5, we have Richard Watsham from UK TV, we have Zy Bennett from Sky, we have Fiona Campbell, who runs BBC 3, and Patrick Holland, who runs BBC 2, and we have Ian Katz from Channel 4. So I think that's a pretty stellar lineup. And then we've also got various sort of genre chiefs within those sort of channel groups and organisations as well. So it really is, the sort of, it's a really fantastic lineup day by day of people who are kind of running the channels and talking about how they're keeping the lights on, how they're communicating with internally and with their suppliers, with producers, what they can and can't do. Because, budgets are, we can see from reading broadcasts, from reading, other stories out there, we can see how budgets are under pressure, so how people are kind of cutting their cloth. But also, I think one of the things that we want to do this year, there's a kind of torrent of bad news, really, and it is bad news. This is a horrible situation. But I think producers and indies are, by their very nature, kind of entrepreneurial and creatively ingenious. So we also want to shine a light on some of the amazing stuff that is happening at a horrible period. So kind of, that creativity in a crisis story, if you like. And that's not to get away from the fact that it is a crisis. And, if you're a freelancer, if you're in certain parts of the industry, you're really, really facing a tough time. And that's another thing, actually, that for the festival this year, freelancers go free. There'll be no charge for freelancers. We want to just open our doors and say, if we can help untangle some of the mess, help you understand X, Y, or Z, or you can, you want to hear from people, then tune in, and there's no cost. And that's from the stuff we'll be doing next week with the controllers, and that's right through to the festival itself. So, I'd encourage people, freelancers who are, having a tough time to get involved and register, and they can pick and choose what they want to dip into.
Well, that's a fantastic offer for freelancers who are obviously the lifeblood of the TV industry, and I think we're going to talk a little bit later about the importance of freelancers to the industry, and perhaps how this whole coronavirus crisis might help reset the balance between freelance and permanent staff and broadcasters and producers. But that all sounds fantastic. Thank you for that, Stuart. Let's get down to talking a little bit about your chosen industry stories of the week. You've highlighted a piece from your former publication, Variety. Tell us a little bit about that one.
So that's a piece about the Cannes Lions, which is another festival which has had to kind of rethink what it's doing, and they're moving a lot of kind of sort of masterclass and intelligence stuff online. And it was previously behind a paywall, now they're making it free. And to me, it was the latest in a very long line of events, festivals, and markets that are kind of really trying to get to grips with what you do in a year when there are very few, let's be honest, if any, physical events. And I'm just kind of very much living that at the moment in thinking about how you sort of breathe life into something. So Cannes Lions is also it's a really interesting event, and they kind of go out to have sessions that are go a little bit further in terms of being interactive and engaging and kind of edgy and fun. So at the moment, I see what they're doing, or Sheffield, or any of the big events, what MIP did, Series Mania, and kind of trying to take little pieces from that and kind of work out what's what, and spending a lot of time, as I'm sure everyone is, on Zoom and digital platforms consuming content. And it's just interesting because I don't think there is sort of standard best practice yet. But what I have realised actually, since we announced moving to digital, that clearly that's not first choice. I don't think anyone would pretend otherwise. But there's also a lot of stuff you can do that you might not have been able to do in physical form. Whether that's engaging with people on the other side of the planet who might not be able to fly to wherever you are, or whether it's doing kind of in much more interactive stuff and live stuff as well. So I think it's just what we're seeing is kind of the reinvention of those industry events. And I think what happens this year is kind of people will work out what works for them and get through. But I don't think things just go back to normal next year as well. The stuff that works will stick, and I think become the new normal.
And just looking at all of those events that have either been cancelled, postponed, or been reimagined in some way, as well as Edinburgh, where this year so far, I mean, this is not an exhaustive list, I'm sure, but I made a note of Series Mania, MIP TV, Cannes Lions, Banff, South by Southwest, Film Art, Hot Docs, World Content Market Moscow, Sheffield Doc Fest, Cannes Film Festival, Annecy, Monte Carlo, Sunny Side of the Dock, NatP Budapest, Children's Media Conference. I'm sure there's others that I've missed there, but I think you're absolutely right. We're now going to be able to look at those events and the value that they offer, and perhaps it is maybe a time to question the role some of them have got, because I think at one point, I certainly remember a few years ago having a chat with various executives, and they said that they could actually spend their whole lives going from one festival to another permanently all year round. And obviously environmental impact and various other issues around that are perhaps we were thinking a lot more about towards the back end of last year, maybe also coming to the fore now. And maybe there are positives in a way that we can reimagine things for the better once we start coming out of this crisis.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, in a sense, what's happening might just accelerate the pace of change, might accelerate what was kind of inevitable to a certain extent anyway. And it's glib at the moment, at a moment of crisis, to talk about people going to Cannes to have their rosé moment, but the truth still is there is a need for, or a demand for, people to be in the same space. But of course, all those pressures you talked about were being talked about ahead of this horrible moment we're in, and that's why when I talked about all that controller stuff that we're doing with the broadcasters, that's why I think it becomes much more about a sort of year-round conversation rather than just a given couple of days in a year, and actually sort of providing something substantial that runs throughout the year. So, we'll be doing that stuff I mentioned next week with the broadcasters, and then the week after that we're doing something with the sort of production chiefs, and then the week after that with analysts. And the point is, I don't think you can any longer think about just a very, very isolated moment in time and expect people to, spend a lot of money and commit to being there without giving them something over and above that.
Well, I'm sure that the whole crisis that we're going through now will no doubt lead to us all changing the way that we think about the ways we do business, the costs and benefits of the things that we do, and how we might change those going forward for the greater good. Okay, thanks, Stuart. Chris, let's bring you in now. How are you all coping over there at Broadcast with the crisis?
We're being relentlessly cheerful. Justin, because frankly there's no other option. It's very challenging, isn't it? It's hard. I'm slightly old-fashioned, used to working in a sort of team. I really like having people around me. I like colleagues sort of sparking off one another, and all of that is obviously kind of very difficult to do at the moment. Awful lot of Slack messages being exchanged, but definitely no substitute for a good old-fashioned face-to-face conversation. So we're doing our best under pretty testing times, but there's certainly a lot to write about.
Absolutely, and I'm sure there's the opportunity to talk about the bright spots as well as a fairly unrelenting stream of bad news stories, which is obviously going to be coming through.
People are watching lots of telly. That's good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, there's some incredible ratings figures coming through, and obviously Netflix is also proving to be a beneficiary of this terrible scenario. So, Chris, let's go into your first story that you identified. This is a recent piece in Broadcast. Channel 4 rocked by 800-hour coronavirus crisis. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, in some ways, the pandemic's really challenging for all broadcasters. It's particularly challenging for commercial broadcasters, and it's especially challenging for those commercial broadcasters which are most heavily reliant on advertising. C4 being front and centre of that group, and it's a double whammy for them. They're quite open in acknowledging this. It's a double whammy in the sense of their ad revenues, fundamentally their revenues have been halved in recent months, and their entire pipeline of programming is on ice, because so few shows can actually be made under the current circumstances. So you've got a situation where you've got no money coming in and no no programming coming in either, and you've got to quickly create, commission, produce shows that can fill the linear schedule up, and do so at a time when you can't really see where your next pound's coming from. So really, really challenging circumstances, and C4 are. It's interesting. You could, an organisation or any company facing that could become quite defensive about it. They are being very brave and optimistic and forward thinking, but they're not shying away from the challenges they face either. And yeah, 800 hours is roughly the amount of programming that they had lined up, that was coming through, that is effectively put on ice, like I say, until such time as normal service can be resumed.
£250 million programme budget slashed, which is a huge amount. How are they going to do this? What's their way out of this situation?
So it's 150 that's come off so there's 258 million of total savings that the organisation is making, of which 150 comes from the programming budget. There's around 95 million coming from other savings, different departments in the organisation. But yeah, I mean, 150 million largely from the origination budget. So you're looking at around back of a cigarette packet. If anyone still has cigarette packets these days, don't know. 25%, basically, 25% of their annual origination spend needs to come out of the schedule, and that's too big a cut to be sort of mitigated here and there. You can't do it through salami slicing, basically. So effectively, what they're doing is they're looking at, let's say they had a show lined up and it was being made for 150 grand an episode. They will need, and that's now been put on hold, they will need to fill that that hole in the schedule for something at significantly lower than that price, so that they actually sort of effectively bank the difference, if you see what I mean, bank the saving, and that's where they're going to need to make up that money. And some of that can be through boxing clever and doing the kind of programming that you're seeing celebs or talent filming from home, and it's sort of done on a sort of Microsoft Teams or a kind of Zoom basis, or slightly more professional version of that. But in the end, I'm sure they'll have to fill some holes with repeats, with acquired content, possibly movies. But the schedules for Channel 4, the schedules for all the big broadcasters come the summer are going to look very, very different.
Yeah, well, I saw that Channel 5 has just acquired the whole of the catalogue to Golden Girls, and it's about to start playing that out. And I can imagine we might be seeing those sort of programming decisions, presumably from all the broadcasters, just to fill that volume of lost hours.
Yeah, I mean, look, the scripted genres are most affected by this, in the sense that they are the highest tariff hours, and they're often the genre of programming that require the greatest number of production crew to make them. You can make a documentary with, it might be a producer director sort of shooting the thing with one AP and a kind of runner on the side, and you can do it with a small number of people very cost effectively, and also potentially do that still observing some form of social distancing. It's hard to do that on a drama where, I don't know, the level of catering crew alone that you need would be massive. So those are the genres: scripted comedy, scripted drama, that are toughest to do.
And obviously talent as well is a major issue there, because what talent schedules are usually set up 1-2 years in advance, certainly bigger talent. So that's also going to create or add to this logjam that we're expecting to probably run through next year.
I wrote last week that September has become the kind of month of choice that everyone in the industry is saying to me, that's one for September, that's one for September. But frankly, this idea that every single TV production that's been put on ice over the last sort of, from the middle of March all the way through to then is suddenly going to swing back into action in September. The industry's capacity to do that is very limited. And I definitely think, on high-end drama, on the stuff that's co-pro'd by big American broadcasters or the SVODs, where you're talking about epic things with battle scenes and hundreds of extras and all that kind of stuff, I'd be amazed if those things are properly in production, but until, I don't know, January of next year. Because insurance is bubbling away in the background of all of this. If the idea that you say, okay, we've got this drama and it requires 300 people to produce it, and come September comes around and there's been some easing of lockdown or whatever it might be, but you'd still have to be pretty brave to say, okay, right, we're going for it, knowing that there could be a second wave of coronavirus or that anything could happen, and you're uncertain necessarily about whether your insurance policy is going to cover you for that. I suspect for the really big epic drama, it might be the new year before we see things back fully underway.
Well, I think that's a really good point, and I know Channel 4's recent new daytime show, The Steph Show, which was going to be their centerpiece daytime show, filming in Leeds, is obviously now being filmed in Harrogate from Steph's house, and it started fairly well, but ratings are not looking too good for that at the moment. It has lost about a third of its audience since it launched. We're talking about that sort of programming being shot from people's houses, low budget as possible. The drama, the stuff that looks great on screen is probably going to be far out, going to be 6, 8, 12 months away. Are we going to get a bit fed up of cheap TV on screen?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think we will get fed up of that. I think there's definitely a novelty value and a sort of novelty factor at the moment of seeing things produced in that way. I think that will wear thin pretty quickly. But that's where, look, the broadcasters have got a pipeline of things that they were sitting on, or that just got in under the wire. There's, shows that are being put through post-production remotely, for example, that have just have finished their sort of principal photography and are now being sort of edited and cut together, and all the post is being done. So they have got a limited sort of pipeline of new content, and they'll be strategizing about dropping that in to the schedules at the right moments between now and let's say middle of the autumn. And then I suspect they will make clever use of repeats, though it helps if you're the BBC and you're ITV and you have a massive in-house production arm where you own loads of rights to programming, so that you can sort of go back and cultivate and curate parts of the Lear schedule with a sort of best of British. Funnily enough, the much derided BritBox, the ITV, BBC, and now C4, C5 joint venture, is predicated on the idea that there's a latent appetite for people to watch Prime Suspect or Cracker or whatever it might be, and that theory might get tested over the summer. And broadcasters just done an interview with Dan McGolpin, who's both the head of scheduling and the head of iPlayer for the BBC. And he's talking about trying to get quite a clever interplay between those two things going forward. So, they're repeating Gavin and Stacey on a linear basis at the moment, and then push to iPlayer for the complete series on box set.
And that brings us on to your second news story, Stuart, which is all about the BBC history content offering in the way that they are pulling together iPlayer online and the Red Button to educate the nation's children. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, my kids might burst in at any second if they're not watching it as I do this. But I think the point is that a lot of people were saying that the BBC was maybe doing too much. But I think at this sort of moment, when you see these kind of initiatives, that thing, David Attenborough and Danny Dyer and people like that kind of getting involved in doing bite-sized lessons, I think it changes perceptions of around the BBC. I think in the same way, other national institutions have become sort of more revered and loved. And I'm not necessarily putting the BBC, in the same bracket, but I just think that the outlook for it as an institution and for all public service broadcasters is perhaps different to how it looked pre-crisis.
Well, it's just a few short months since the last election, and the BBC was really in the firing line, seemingly from all the major political parties, and there was leaks and rumours around the BBC going to get a whacking from the new government, I think was the actual term that we saw. What an incredible 6 months it's been for them now, because now they can really come into their own, can't they, as an increasingly important player within the nation's cultural diet.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting time for a new Director General to step in, and that landscape, as I say, looks different to just how it did a few short months ago.
Chris, what do you think the BBC can do that others can't in times of crisis?
They can make use of the things that in some ways in other areas sort of hold them back a little bit. So Stuart was talking about impartiality and being trusted. I think on this issue, I suspect the BBC is probably more trusted than just about any other media organisation in the UK, and you can really make use of that. The fact that, linear schedules are a funny thing, aren't they? There's clearly a generational issue, and there's clearly a inexorable move away from linear towards on demand. The rate of that change is obviously the thing that's most often up for debate. When you have a linear schedule like the BBC does, and you have a good level of funding, and let's be honest, the BBC is suffering more than any other broadcaster in terms of its pipeline of content being messed up, frankly. But what they're not losing is their income. So they've got a pot of money. They've got linear schedules, they've got a trusted brand, and they're able to do interesting and innovative things with flexible scheduling, flexible production, quick turnaround, that feels like it helps embed the BBC in the national conversation. And I think the political pressure it was under before this crisis was very real. I think it will be much harder when all this ends for the government to give the BBC the whacking that you referred to, Justin, because the British public would have rallied round, and it's helped it be distinctive. Before all this, do you remember there was a lot of questioning of the BBC around, why can't the BBC be more like Netflix? And Netflix has got all these great shows, and it only costs whatever, £7-8 a month kind of thing. And why isn't the BBC more like Netflix? And the answer to that for the BBC now is, well, aren't you glad that we're not like Netflix? Because we're the ones that are speaking to the nation, basically. We're the ones that feel like we're responding to things, that are able to say, you know what, we're going to pull question time into the main part of the BBC One schedule, or we're going to introduce sort of health check programming that will be hopefully reassuring, hopefully myth busting for the viewing public. And so they're able to really flex a lot of those muscles.
So Chris, let's talk about your second story, which was all about freelancers and the exodus that we're looking at in the coming weeks and months. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's a very straightforward story, which is the vast majority of people who make Britain's television shows are employed on a freelance basis. And if there is a hard stop on, let's say, 95% of all production, those people don't work. And if those people are freelancers and they don't work, they don't get paid. And I'm oversimplifying. And there is lots of uncertainty around government support schemes and whether certain groups of TV freelancers are eligible or not. But putting all of that to one side, you've got a situation where the freelance production community feels as though no one's really got its back at the moment, neither the broadcasters nor the indies that generally employ it. And when the industry is run on such a casualized basis, when production companies are so lean, I mean, it's perfect business sense. If you run a production company, you operate that production company with the smallest overheads possible at any given moment. You win a commission and you staff up, hiring in the best people you can get to make the show. But the problem with that is when we're having this unprecedented hard stop on production, the cracks in that system are starting to appear. People aren't working, they're not getting paid. And at the end of it, talented freelance staff are going to think to themselves, can I continue to work in an industry whereby if things go wrong, I'm left to my own devices? And that's the real concern at the moment. The sort of outpouring of anxiety, worry, anger from the freelance community is very real. And
so hopefully we may see a reset of that, the relationship between freelancers, producers, broadcasters, etc. Hopefully that at the end of this, we'll find as many ways that we can to keep as much talent as we can within the industry, but presumably we are going to lose a lot of talented people to other industries just so they can make ends meet. Because what we do know is that there's going to be a massive recession coming on the back end of all of this.
Yeah, completely. I mean, look, it's difficult in the sense that the industry works and operates in the way that it does for sound economic reasons. But when you have I was going to say a bump in the road. It's a bit more than a bump in the road, isn't it? It's like a bloody great big boulder in the road or a brick wall in the road. But it's just highlighted the issues. There is a shortfall. It's hard to get great SPs, great DOPs, editors. Like editors are like good editors are like gold dust. It's hard to find those people anyway. If some of them start to leave the industry, that's even more problematic. But at the moment, like I say, the thing I keep returning to on all of this is that so many people feel like they've just been cast adrift, really, that no one really is looking out for them. And that I just think the industry needs to look at the way it engages and employs people in the longer term, because there's so much work being done into trying to make the industry more accessible and a viable career path for a broader range of people. And all this does is push it back in the opposite direction.
So it's time for Heroes of the Week. This is the part of the show that we get to nominate our favourite and least favourite person or thing of the week. Stuart, who are you going to nominate as your hero of the week and why?
I think it's a nice follow-on from all the stuff the issues Chris has been raising. And this is not someone I know, but I can see, and I've been watching some brilliant stuff from Donna Tabara. I think she absolutely stepped up, and it was more than just one or two sessions with screen skills. It was a full program, or it is a full program running over weeks. And we've talked about how horrible it is for a large chunk of our industry at the moment, and that kind of stuff is just invaluable. People like that stepping up.
And Chris, how about you? Who's your hero of the week?
Yeah, here, Donatama is a force for good. So my heroes of the week are the families that take part in Gogglebox. It's interesting that at a time when you can't go and see your mates or go and see your family, that you sort of feel like you crave a bit of community spirit. And I've really enjoyed. I always enjoy Gogglebox. I think it continues to be a really fantastic show. But there's something very apposite about watching Gogglebox and getting a little window into people's lives at a time when you can't really sense that in other areas. And they showed the families responding to and watching the Queen's address to the nation, and a couple of the people that watched it were sort of emotional and sort of in tears. And the cynic in me would sort of normally roll his eyes and be a bit scornful, but it kind of brought together that sense of everyone in their own little isolated way feeling the same thing and having to cope with the same challenges. And so more power to the Gogglebox families and the Gogglebox production crew as well, doing a fantastic job.
And we've also got a new section in the show called Get in the Bin. So, as you might imagine, that is who or what is your villain of the week. Chris?
Yeah, I've been flippant again. The thing that is annoying me at the moment, I spend an awful lot of my time on Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and I'm getting quite frustrated at how much nicer everyone's houses and bookshelves are than mine. So whether it's my colleagues who appear to be very well read, better read than I thought they were, or whether it's politicians with a strategically placed Winston Churchill biography or whatever it might be, the sort of Microsoft Teams backdrop of bookcases and nice posh houses, they're the things that are really getting my goat this week.
Stuart, who are you putting in the bin?
Well, I'm loath to actually put anyone in the bin. That feels a bit harsh. But I did think that Eamon Holmes made a big misstep when appearing to give any form of credence to kind of conspiracy theories around 5G. We were talking earlier about how the sort of main channels are a place, a trusted source of information. And I think I kind of undermined that. I don't want to put him in the bin, though, because he's bigger than me.
That's pretty understandable. Guys, thanks so much for spending your time with us today, and hope to have you back on the show soon.
Thank you, Justin, from my bedroom in London. Thanks for having me on the show, and good luck with the podcast.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me, mate.
One of the regular slots we're going to be featuring on the show is an insider's view on industry goings-on in the world's biggest TV market, the USA. And I'm delighted to be joined by Deadline Hollywood's TV editor, Peter White, direct from LA. Welcome to the show, Pete.
Thanks, Justin. How are you?
Very well, thanks. How's Tinseltown coping with the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, quite in the same way as many other people, I imagine, trying to figure out how quite to get on with the world. We've sort of moved past stage one, which I guess is everyone shutting down their major productions, and now people trying to work out what comes next. There's been quite a lot of chat in terms of both shows that are on the air and productions that sort of need to be made this year. So people trying to work that out. American Idol being a good example of one of the biggest non-scripted shows that was in the middle of its run this week, that they finally figured out how to put together the live shows, which was going to be a challenge. So they're doing that remotely and filming it in each of the contestants' homes. That was one big show, and then the rest is the same that is marking everywhere else in the world. It's furloughs, it's bracing for layoffs, and it's just trying to cope with this as best we can, I guess.
I've seen an incredible page on Deadline Hollywood's website, which has got all of the shows that have actually stopped production, which is an incredibly long list. So can you tell us a little bit about the major studios? What's happening there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's twofold. We're covering this obviously from the film side and the television side, and as you say, there's hundreds of shows that have shut down. It's it's a full-time challenge just to try and figure them out in the first place. I think what we're starting to see now is what comes next, whether that's what happens over the next few months. We're starting to see whether this has an impact on deals with the showrunners. We've already started to see this morning Marvel looks like they've let a couple of their overall deal execs go. So all of the studios are dealing with it in the same way. Disney was probably the hardest hit, probably brought on by the fact that they have a whole bunch of other businesses, including the theme parks and the cruises, and they've furloughed a number of staff. And people are still trying to work out the impact of this. What's interesting is to see now we've moved into the stage where they're talking about reopening. Whether that's over the next few months. People saying July and August at the earliest, and that's even probably quite optimistic. And now you've got showrunners trying to figure out how do they actually make their shows, whether that's daily testing, whether that's changing the way they do things. One interesting suggestion was making it like TV camp, where you go away, make sure everyone's healthy, lock them in a hotel or a suitable location, and film from there. But certainly what's come out of this is it won't be the same as it was. The craft services won't look the same. There'll be no bowl of M&Ms out on the tables for the staff. You can imagine there'll be fewer romantic comedies and kissing on TV, fewer crowd shots, I imagine, as well. So that's all on top of dealing with insurance and everything else. So it's a huge issue, and people are still trying to get to the bottom of it.
So yeah, we can expect to see socially distanced TV for some time to come, I imagine. You mentioned Disney. Remarkable time for Disney Plus to launch a few weeks ago, and I saw that they'd just hit over 50 million subscribers worldwide. I mean, it's thank goodness that they had launched that at the right time, because, as you say, the rest of their business is theme parks and movies, and the rest of their business is really not performing well at all.
I think every parent in the world is thankful that they can shove their kids in front of Disney Plus right now. Yes, timing is interesting. Yeah, there's been a few. Obviously, Peacock announced that it was launching at the end of July. HBO Max this week revealed that it was launching on May 27th. So we're starting to see that, and obviously Quibi, which is a slightly different case, but similarly launched a couple of weeks ago. It will be interesting to see whether there's a corona bump from any of this. I think obviously a lot of people are at home, and whether they're watching. But it does seem full steam ahead. I mean, the streamers, the big challenge that many of them have is the fact that the production shutdown means that many of their key titles or their launch titles have been delayed. HBO Max, the biggest example of that, was they were hoping to have a Friends reunion to launch their catalogue of all of the Friends episodes, and that's been pushed back. So that was disappointing from them. And similarly, Peacock had things like Saved by the Bell reboot. They still said they'll have their Brave New World show, but whether they've got much else, Matt Strauss, the boss of Peacock, said a significant amount of its originals will be pushed back to 2021. So yeah, it's impacting the streamers in the same way. I think what's interesting, and this ties into the question about the studios as well. While all of this is going on, production is shut down, but development and writing certainly hasn't. We're starting to see that over the last couple of days. There's been a bit of an uptick in terms of things that are either being announced now or sort of put into process. For instance, we've got things like there's William J. Mann's Tinseltown book was just bought by Spectrum, which is a relatively new platform. Amazon rebooting the Michael Douglas film Star Chamber. And I wrote a story about Hulu buying The Other Black Girl based on that book. So on one hand, yes, they're trying to figure out what they've got at the moment, but on the other hand, they're still trying to look down the line and say, once we come out of this, what can we do? So I think that's the thing that's going on. I imagine there's quite a few Zoom pitches happening right now in Hollywood.
And that pre-production ramp-up is obviously absolutely crucial. And now we're finding that also that with all of these production delays, we're going to have presumably trouble over getting talent, because that talent is one of the key things that's obviously going to unlock shooting schedules going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's inevitable. There's going to be a bit of a crush, and they still haven't quite worked out, what's going to come first. The idea of what pencil are you in a person's schedule. I think that's going to be, the agents are going to have some fun trying to figure that out. But I think until we can safely say when we're going to come back, and that's what everyone's been saying to me. It's the delay is one thing, but it's the fact that we don't really know when it's going to come to an end is even bigger. So there's still a lot of these questions to be answered.
Well, thanks for giving us the inside view there, Pete, and we look forward for you to be joining us every week and giving us a little bite-sized chunk of insider knowledge on what's going on in LA. Okay, so I'm delighted to be joined by our analyst partner, K7 Media's Head of Strategy, Gertz Leasis. Gertz, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Justin.
And Gertz, I was doing a little bit of research on you before we started getting together on the show, and I thought it was perfect timing that I saw that you were actually the host of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in Latvia, right?
Yes, you're cheeky, Justin. Yeah, that's true. I was first a producer for the show for the first 6 years, and then we were thinking how to refresh it, and then we relaunched with a new host, which happened to be me.
So is that your final answer?
That's my final answer. Yeah, I'm not going to call a friend.
I'm sorry I had to do that. So Gertz, you're going to be joining us every week to give us a bit of insight into what's happening around the world in terms of TV trends. Obviously, there are going to be different developments in lots of different territories in terms of the way the industry is coping with this crisis. What trends are you seeing emerging around the TV world as a result of the current circumstances?
Well, as trivial as it may sound, crises in general unlock creativity. And when we are talking about creative industries, it just couldn't be more obvious, right? And I think that we all hoped it would be the case, but at the same time, perhaps not many expected that this evolution in terms of programming ideas and production solutions will be so swift. What we saw just a few weeks ago was, let's say, a burst of shows featuring mainly celebrities in isolation or, studio hosts joined by other participants over different online tools. They play along, sing along, dance along, eat along, and, it all just seemed that we had entered some endless chain of on-screen do-alongs. And now what we see just a few weeks later is, I think, a completely different story. While there are and still will be these shows around, let's call them reflective of the situation that we all happen to be in, we can feel more and more proactivity, taking matters in our own hands and just dealing with them kind of shows. So, for example, if this is a cooking show, it's about food that is healthy, practical, on budget. If it's about gardening or makeover, it's a DIY experience. You're feeling lonely. Remote dating will, sort your problem. Or your four walls or hyperactive kids around you 24/7 are starting to drive you crazy. No worries, we'll get you advice from a professional and so on and so on. So, it's changed a lot. And not surprisingly, the prevailing tone that audiences are currently expecting from shows other than news is encouragement, uplifting, emotional, fun. And this trend of looking to escape from the gloom of current, newscasts resonates very well with what we saw in the aftermath of 2008 financial crisis when comedy rose to become the top genre. Let's take Spain, for example. Yeah, we all know how serious has been the situation in Spain over the recent weeks, but even there, the public broadcaster has already launched an 8-part sitcom. It's called Quarantine Diaries, and it's featuring life inside 10 different lockdown households.
How about other types of shows?
Well, it's the same story. People are looking for inspiration, for positive emotions and fun. And even the big shiny floor shows have already found some ways to adapt. US is going forward with specially arranged remaining episodes of America's Got Talent. Denmark saw an X Factor special over Easter. It was broadcast from the host's home with judges and the remaining contestants. And the show culminated in all contestants singing together. And then there's a Russian local version of The Masked Singer, which is proving a big success with the recent episodes recording without studio audience, which is then added at edit stage from footage of previous shows. Then look at Quiz. Quiz and other competition shows are back in the picture again as well. Mediaset in Spain, for instance, launched a new quiz format, which is called Carenta, which means 40 in Spanish, but playing with words, obviously, because it's also reminding this very painful word quarantine as well. And in this show, 4 contestants every day answer 40 questions. And although it launched online, the reception was so strong that it is now given a 8 o'clock daily primetime slot on a linear channel. In Belgium, the Container Cup is going to launch later this month in a daily strip on Channel 4. And this is a format in which 40 sportsmen and women from various sports backgrounds will compete against each other in an isolation-friendly heptathlon. 7 different sports disciplines like cycling, climbing, rowing, weightlifting. And this show will be recorded in individual shipping containers, which are specially delivered to the home of each competitor.
I think that sounds a fantastic format, the Container Cup. I hope that gets adapted over in the UK or the US, or I hope that really builds into worldwide hit. It sounds a great idea. Sports is an area that has left the biggest gaps for broadcasters around the world, not least football, Formula One, and the Olympics postponements, of course. What are you seeing in this sector?
You are very much right, Justin. Sports programming, as we all know, has been particularly hard hit, but here again we see different home or virtual tournaments emerging, like Viaplay launching a darts contest in the Nordics or virtual cycling tour in Belgium. And we also see esports getting a boost currently, particularly among traditional sports fans, as that's where a lot of them are finding, this alternative way to release their daily dose of adrenaline. So while the big esports events have been cancelled, it's back to TV screens where it all originated. And of course, coming back to the scripted shows where the productions are still happening, we see narratives adapting to relate to what their viewers are currently experiencing. Like it's the case with a US procedural All Right on CBS, and also in the Belgian version of the young adult hit series Scam. And by the way, another interesting technique we are noticing in order to find this relatability with viewers, current status is shows that are featuring different TV personalities who have experienced kind of lockdown situations before on their own skin, even if it's been, their own free choice, or at least some kind of limitation or living out of ordinary for some period of time. Think contestants, being locked up in a Big Brother house or committing to experiments like 90 Day Fiancé or Married at First Sight. And I think we can also expect more, crossover of different genres and media in coming weeks and months, like filming podcasts, for example, as well. And what's also interesting, the quarantine regime has brought types of interactive programming, which would naturally be associated with online media and social networks, like virtual co-viewing and commenting on the on-screen material and so on. These are now also found on big 3D screens.
So how do you think these innovations might influence programming in the months and the years ahead?
Oh, that's an interesting question, of course. But, we hear media insiders talking about corona-proof content, almost like a term now, arguing that there will be no rerun value of the shows for the shows produced during lockdown due to us all being used to higher production standards, and that the sky is the limit kind of attitude when it comes to creative ideas. However, seeing how quickly telly is adapting to the current rules and how well the new technologies are coming to help with execution, I'm just wondering if the high-end, big-budget premium productions will regain their previous weight and glory in all schedules anytime soon. as an industry, we have loved, to talk about how it's all about the right idea, about the story, and that inexpensive doesn't necessarily mean bad. Well, now here is this reality check. The times have come to prove that we really meant what we were saying. Maybe viewers will be craving for those, super expensive high-end shows to return in high numbers as soon as possible, but maybe not. I'm pretty sure that we will return to this question in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, and I guess the super high budget, high end shows, obviously they're going to be delayed probably more than any of the other unscripted shows. So it's a real opportunity for those great creative ideas that can be delivered for a lower budget to really shine through and give those. Clearly, broadcasters around the world are really going to be looking for those to fill those hours that we talked about, that are missing through the football and all the other sports that's missing in those schedules.
Absolutely, I think that it's a time for those who see opportunity and who just being bold and moving ahead with their ideas, and those who will just wait for the times return where they were, maybe the losers, I think.
Yeah, and maybe it's a new wave of producers who maybe have a new way of doing things that can really take the opportunity to build new businesses as the whole coronavirus pandemic hopefully recedes over the coming months and coming years, and it may usher in that new wave of talent that's willing to do something in a different way. Fantastic. Geertz, thank you so much for spending your time with us this week, and delighted to say you'll be joining us every week to talk about a different subject. Obviously, during this current pandemic, a lot of it's going to be around what countries and what broadcasters and what producers all around the world are doing to address the situation. But thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to hearing back from you on a new subject next week.
Thank you. See you soon.
TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
Well, that just about wraps it up for this very first episode of TellyCast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe, share it with friends and colleagues, and give us a review on your podcast service. We'll be back next week with more news, insight, and opinion. Until then, stay safe.